So in this segment, we're going to be talking about Rishi Sunak's desperate moves, as he doesn't know how to kind of claw back in the polls against Labour, and this is hilarious. And I think, I've seen some analysis from Emily Matler saying that him winning in Uxbridge, Rishi Sunak winning in Uxbridge, has kind of emboldened him and his anti-green policies. And I kind of agree with what she said there, and we'll talk about that in a bit. But this is real bad from Sunak, and this is going to make me late for my live stream. So this, anyways.
The test should be, do we have the fairest...
So this is about moving the production. So they've pushed back the deadline to end the production of kind of petrol and diesel cars from 2030 to 2035.
credible path to reach net zero by 2050 in a way that brings people with us. Now, since I've become Prime Minister, I've examined our plans, and I don't think they meet that.
As Chancellor, he agreed to these plans. As any member of the Cabinet, you agree to these plans because collective responsibility exists. So, a couple of years ago, he said these plans were going to work, and now he's saying, nah. Wonder why, as Prime Minister, he's reneging on these promises.
That test. We seem to have defaulted to an approach which will impose unacceptable costs on hard-pressed British families. Costs that no one was ever really told about.
What do you mean these costs were not told about? You should have explained it to people when you come up with these policies in the first place. If it wasn't explained to people, then clearly you've done a bad job, or you lied to them initially. Not hard to figure out which one it was. And this from Newsnight, which I found quite fun. 7 Ben Sunak.
The Prime Minister said that he's managed to stop a series of measures. So no taxes on eating meat, no new taxes to discourage flying. You won't be forced to sort your rubbish into 7 different bins, no compulsory car sharing, and no expensive insulation upgrades. I do have to say, I don't think many powerful people were talking about putting new taxes on meat or forcing you to share your car. But I do have to say, we did manage to track down one quite powerful person who quite liked the idea of sorting your rubbish into lots of bins.
Recycling, and that is the thing that in our house we are obsessive about. I know it's a pain, you need lots of bins, but it is something that is very good for the environment.
Okay, that was the leadership debates just over a year ago.
Clearly, he's against all of these bins, and this idea of having several bins, like where I live, across different areas is different. All the recycling goes into one box, so we have 2 boxes. You can put recycling in either one. You don't have to sort them out anymore, which is phenomenal. Something I do appreciate. No taxes on meat. Like, the only way there would be taxes on meat is if your party introduced them, seeing as you're in government. No new taxes to discourage flying. Same thing. Sunak loves flying. He's always in the private jet or the heli. Sorting your rubbish out into 7 bins. Again, discuss that one. Compulsory car sharing. Like, there's no way an employer is going to make you share your car. Like, that's just generally stupid, and it seems very unsafe. And no expensive insulation upgrades. Now, there were actual schemes to help people get house insulation back during I think it was under New Labour, actually. I was only aware of it under the Cameron regime, but it was actually a New Labour scheme. And I managed to help get one of my family members it, so it was good times, They were very thankful for that. But that was a Labour scheme. I didn't know. I thought it was a Tory scheme, but that's because I saw it back in around 2010, I think. So, they're not going to force people to get, insulation, which no one was forcing it. What you've done is you've created a monster and then said, I've saved you from this monster, or it doesn't even make sense. What are you going to do next? Are you going to save us from Thanos, from Shocker, from the rest of the Sinister Six? Who are you going to save us from? The Joker, Freezer? Like, I don't get it. I genuinely don't get it. I'm so confused by this. This is from Michael Gove, who was a couple of days before this statement from Sunak. Sorry, you got to look at his pixelated face.
I'm glad you brought up the cars. Are you scrapping or saying that no more petrol and diesel cars can be used in the UK, or new cars in the UK from 20?
They can't be produced after that date. She said it really clumsily there. But that was the initial pledge by the Conservatives. Then they changed it to hybrid. They were saying, it's hybrid cars will be allowed from that date on, or something like that, to be produced for another 5 years. It has been very strange, a very strange couple of weeks.
30.
Yes.
Okay, so there was some confusion about that yesterday. That's an absolute guarantee.
Yes.
Okay.
He said, I guarantee, and the guy who says I guarantee, he gets called out for his takes being bad and not happening. Clearly, Michael Gove comes from that school. This from Shahab Khan, who says, sources in the car industry are utterly furious with the government. Senior figures tell me they received personal assurances from government ministers that everything was on track just last week. No mention of this delay at any point. The UK is closed for business, they say. And so what had happened is these businesses kind of planned to kind of stop production of these kind of petrol cars in the UK, and they would switch to electrics. And obviously retooling your factory is incredibly expensive, and now I don't think they're really that sure on what to do here. I don't know what to make of this kind of stuff, especially when it means that there'll be delays to the infrastructure as well, getting the charging points and things like that up and running. It doesn't make sense.
Now, in the
This is a Conservative MP getting punked by Sophie Ridge, which is quite fun.
speech, Rishi Sunak also said that he'd blocked plans to tax meat, introduce compulsory car sharing, and make people sort their rubbish into 7 bins. Can you remind me when these things were actually going to happen? Because, I mean, maybe I've got amnesia. I can't remember any of these.
All right, well, listen, I'm Justice Secretary, as you know, but I think I don't know precisely who has...
He's distant, so I'm just Justice Secretary, as you know. Like, bro, you're in the cabinet. You should know what's going on. They should be discussed in the meetings if any of these things were going to be imposed on people.
Said these things.
7
What I do
bins? I mean, what would you even put in 7 bins?
What I can say...
meat tax?
What I can say is that I think the Climate Change Committee has been making certain
Have you
suggestions about how we...
have you also blocked
how we
plans to, like, ban people from eating ice cream for dessert as well? It's like, what?
Look, I don't know...
You can see how absurd it is by that laugh, because he doesn't know what to say. He's awestruck, or dumbstruck. He doesn't know what to say here, because she's absolutely taken him out, because this is such an easy thing to kind of mock. Again, is he going to protect us from the boogeyman?
Specifically who said it. But what I can say is that Climate Change Committee have made certain suggestions, and I think, from memory, they've said certain things about how you should approach dairy and
these
meat.
Are very, come
So-
on, these
but
are
they-
very
but they- I
different.
think-
If some,
I think-
somebody has made suggestions,
But I
Rishi
think-
Sunak said he blocked these measures coming
But
into
Sophie,
law.
I think but I think what he's
That's
saying...
so
no, perhaps
disingenuous.
it's,
This
no,
is
it's
the
not.
man who's
It's not.
supposed to be
It's not.
levelling
Stop.
with people.
Yeah, I think she absolutely had him there. It's just a really bad performance. But to be fair, you can't really defend this stuff. And Rishi Sunak himself kind of struggled.
But I've just spoken to them, I've just interviewed them, and they said there is no mention of a tax on meat in any of their reports.
If you look at their report, it talks about an accelerated shift away from dairy and meat.
That's not a tax on meat.
It said that diets will need to shift away. It also says we'd have to implement measures to bring that about.
So they didn't propose a tax.
And, I think he's talking about select committee here or some sort of committee report. Like, these are typically full of Tories because the Tories have the majority in Parliament. So this would be members of his own party kind of proposing these things. And so he's kind of stopped members of his own party proposing things. Like, I don't get what he's doing here.
I mean, where was the proposal for a compulsory car sharing that you say you scrapped?
Again, you can, if you look in their report, it will talk very clearly about what they could describe as ride-sharing solutions, otherwise known as exactly what I was saying.
That's
and
different from compulsory car sharing proposal.
What it then says euphemistically is one would need to consider demand-side measures to bring that about, which are otherwise known as compulsion or taxes. But elsewhere, actually, they're very open that taxes should be.
Or it could be incentivized that if you car share with people, maybe your employer gives you some sort of voucher or some sort of reward for it. It doesn't have to necessarily mean do this or you're in trouble. It could mean do this and this is a benefit. This is what you will get out of it. They could be incentivized. I don't get what the point he's trying to make here. But he's trying to defend his own utter stupidity.
Used to send a signal on things like reducing travel demand or the amount that people
was the
drive.
government considering forcing people to have 7 bins? Another proposal you said you've scrapped?
Yeah, so if you look in the Environment Act and the associated consultations that were in place around 2021 from memory, there's a very clear statement in there about moving to consistent collection for recycling, the clear implication of which is 7 bins, and you can go through
There's no implication of 7 bins. You have made that implication. If they're saying that they want to, the bin collection in certain areas, it's once a week or once every other week, right? What he's saying here doesn't make sense. Like, there'd be, they would have to use 7 bins. Like, unless he's talking about you would have 7 bins over a period of time because you would need it because you would have so much to throw out because there'd only have been collection every other week. I don't know the point he's trying to make here.
Again, that's what people have raised concerns with, and that's what the policy work was looking at.
Hold on just a second. No, hold on a second, Prime Minister. You stand up with the authority of Prime Minister in this building and you say you're scrapping a series of proposals. And when I ask you about them, you say, oh, somebody considered and it was in the appendix of this document. There's nothing to be scrapped, which is why your former Environment Minister says you're pretending to halt frightening proposals that simply do not exist.
No, I reject that entirely. These are all things that have been raised by very credible people about ways to meet our net zero obligations, alongside the very substantial...
These are just ideas, like, when Just Stop Oil say stop using oil. This is, like, are you going to say I stop Just Stop Oil as well, and that we will keep using oil? It doesn't make sense what he's arguing here.
Changes that we've announced when it comes to the transition on electric vehicles and how we heat our homes, and whether people should be forced, we believe they should not be, to improve the energy efficiency in their homes.
But the problem is, you said yesterday in your speech, this isn't about politics, and yet minutes after this, your party headquarters issued social media things saying Rishi Sunak has scrapped this, he scrapped that. There was a press release.
I mean, it's very, very clearly coordinated, because that stuff can take time to produce. But one of the other things they did get rid of is landlords having to have certain energy efficiency ratings on their houses. Like, I mean, that was the only one that would be forced to do insulation, and that would have been a good measure, that they would have to actually invest in their in their investments. Put some money into their houses. Given the fact that some of these houses are uninhabitable. And this is one of the things he was talking about, the interviewer there, who is Nick Robertson. I think this is one of the things he's talking about. He goes, "This is not about politics," says Sunak. This from Alex Wickham, who works for Bloomberg, saying 1 hour later, CCHQ sends emails to journalists titled "Questions to Labour on Net Zero." Like this kind of stuff here. And, Keir Starmer must decide whether he stands on the biggest long-term challenges of climate change. Like, this is clearly party political. No one can deny that. The Labour kind of just roasting them on this one.
Now, I know above all else, businesses want certainty and a level playing field, which is what our zero-emission vehicle mandate is for. It's why we've recently consulted with you on how it should work. It will require a minimum number of new zero-emission car sales in the run-up to 2030.
The next day, I'm announcing today that we're going to ease...
Damn, it really was the next day, wasn't it? Damn, that's good use of the SpongeBob meme there. Damn, that's cold-blooded. 40.7% of people are less likely to vote Tory now that Rishi Sunak has watered down net zero commitments. Again, this will impact their kind of conservative voters who do believe in certain green policies, and the idea that the Conservatives are there to kind of conserve things like the environment. Labour confirmed they oppose the 2030 electric cars target delay, so one of the rare positives from Labour. This is the clip earlier I was talking about from Mattless. We're not going to bother playing it, but clearly that Uxbridge election, or at least according to her, and I agree with it, that Uxbridge kind of election has emboldened Sunak on going on an anti-green agenda. This is pretty funny because they're cutting down on HS2 as well, kind of feeding into this culture war nonsense. Sunak saying, "I'm on the side of motorists." Do you know what would help motorists? People using less cars and going on trains, because then the roads are clearer.
Angela, is HS2 going to Manchester?
Spades are in the ground, and the government is committed to delivering HS2.
It looks like she's desperately trying to remember the line someone told her before the show started.
The government has been subsidising rail fares since the pandemic. They've been trying to get people back onto the railways.
Ironically, I think we still pay more than a lot of other European countries for train travel. So, they're not doing a lot, are they? They're subsidising big companies that are impacted by the strikes. That's about it.
The investment is there, and...
But this is rather what the minister did in the House earlier in the week. Is it going to Manchester? And people kept asking, and he wouldn't confirm. Is it going to Manchester?
Well, she said spades are in the ground. We don't know where these spades are. Is it, in the distance between Manchester and Birmingham, or where are these spades? Is someone in her garden with a spade? What's going on here?
Well, I'd like to know what Labour Party's position is on HS2 and what they plan to do.
I mean, she tried to flip it on Labour by giving them one of the most pathetic answers, or pathetic non-answers I've ever heard. They asked, is it going from Birmingham to Manchester? Well, I want to hear what Labour have to say about it. It don't make sense. And clearly, Tory donor threatens to pull funding if Sunak scraps HS2. So this is the owner of is one of the football clubs in Birmingham. They're saying that they are very unhappy about this, because obviously it's going to affect people being able to go to their football club effectively. And so if you look at the HS2 Western leg to Manchester in doubt, Eastern leg to be confirmed. There's the Manchester one there. It just doesn't make sense what they're doing, especially when the Conservative conference is in Manchester as well. Why would you want to piss off Mancunians in the run-up to this? And, you got the Tory... you got Grant Shapps, who I think, is he in charge of transport still? Saying that it'd be crazy not to review the cost of HS2. But ironically, we are paying more for HS2 than other countries have for their high-speed rail, and they've gotten much, much more progress on building their own high-speed rail than we have. There was a graph, I don't think I've got it, but, you know, there was meant to be an announcement. I think it got leaked. This whole thing got leaked, and that's what's caused Sunak so many problems. But it's not clear when we're going to get such an announcement. Sam Coates speculating it's going to be in the November statement, which is very possible. You got this from Matthew Stadlin, who I don't know who he works for. His Twitter bio is not clear. But he's saying, why is Rishi Sunak railing against a blanket 20 mile per hour speed limit when it doesn't exist? Does he really take the British people for fools? Yeah, he does. I think he does, and I think to an extent he's not wrong to. I mean, but this interview is embarrassing from Sunak.
Agree with Penny Morden that Wales's 20 miles an hour policy is insane.
Yeah, I think imposing a blanket 20 mile an hour speed limit on areas is absolutely not right.
It's not blanket though, is it?
It doesn't reflect people's priorities. People are dependent on their cars for their day-to-day journeys, and these kind of blanket bans aren't the right proportionate approach. But also, it comes on top of this other policy not to build any new roads as well. Like, when you take these things together, it seems like an attack on motorists, and it's rightly received the opposition that it deserves.
I do have to pick you up. It's not a blanket ban, though. It's not a blanket speed limit. There's 30 miles, 40, 50, 60, 70, so it's not blanket.
Well, I don't think that's quite right. I mean, look...
Well, I don't think that's quite right. Well, you know, I've got news for you, Rishi. It's right. There's not a blanket 20 miles per hour speed limit. It doesn't. There are motorways that run in Wales. Do you think they're going to go 20 miles per hour? Like, how stupid do you think people are?
The opposition in Wales...
Don't answer that.
It's clear. You don't need me to tell you. You've seen the unprecedented amount of opposition to the policy.
Sure, but language is important, isn't it? And if you're going to call it a blanket...
Well, you know, he's clearly lying here, and I think the journalist should call him out that. It's like, what you're saying here is a lie. Honestly, but journalists are pretty cowardly in that. And this is something I found in on Twitter again. Yes, Alex Wickham again, writing in Bloomberg, and this is hilarious. This is genuinely funny. And the more I read this Twitter thread, the more I laughed. Which is, number 10 say now we'll see the real Rishi Sunak, the long-term optimist, couched in fiscal prudence and social conservatism. One ally says a sensible populist. Has another. There's no such thing as a sensible populist. You know, populism is to do what's popular, which, you know, doesn't always mean being sensible. Evidenced by Rishi Sunak scrapping parts of HS2 and going anti-green. To this extent, it don't make sense. People close to Sunak say his defining emotion as Prime Minister and Chancellor has been frustration. Been frustrated with him a lot, to be fair. With how he's annoyed about how British politics works, the 24-hour news cycle, Twitter. He's angry at Twitter. Let's go. He'd probably get angry about getting ratioed, and he's unable to implement his political philosophy. But bro, like, you're the Prime Minister of this country. You have a 70+ seat majority. If you can't implement your own philosophy, you're the failure at that point. You know, what comes next? He's seriously considering paring back HS2, which we know has happened, because this tweet thread's from a couple of days ago. Cutting a rise in benefits, that's something the Conservatives have discussed, because they want benefits to go, benefits are meant to kind of go and rise in line with inflation. The Conservatives are not wanting to do that and want to do a tax cut instead. Tinkering with pensions, some stuff got leaked on that, and I think Sunak's pulled back on it. Changing to how the foreign aid budget works. Again, when in doubt, talk about cutting the foreign aid budget. A deal on Frontex, which is possible they're going to get, but I'm not sure what that's going to look like. Hope for Rwanda this year, or I hope Rwanda doesn't work. Sunak is considering an intervention aimed at boosting innovation and British industry. I mean, sure, it's great to say, just like how everyone keeps saying, we need to grow the economy. How are you going to boost innovation, big man? Because the most you've done is get us back into Horizon. That's about it. Change the tax system to further encourage capital investment. Okay. A focus on life sciences, advanced manufacturing, digital tech, Brexit opportunities. Again, life sciences, whatever. Advanced manufacturing. How are you going to do that when you can't get the raw materials in? Because customs is a pain if you're getting anything in from the EU. Digital tech, that's a buzzword. Brexit opportunities, like what? What opportunities have you created? Areas chosen in part due to Sunak's personal interests. Legacy building. I mean, he's not built much of a legacy, has he? But, you know, he also wants to pose questions for Labour. Cost-saving policies, if unmatched by Labour, require them to find new funding. I think they're going to use HS2 to do that. That's what that screams of. They're going to say, how would Labour fund HS2 if they wanted to connect to Manchester? Cultural issues add pressure to Starmer. I mean, I mean, Starmer's kind of bitten into the culture war quite aggressively, so I don't think he's going to work on that. I don't think that's going to work, especially when you're failing on these culture wars that you created. Sunak will argue he's triangulating between naysayers holding back the future economy and the Labour Party he says will go too fast. I mean, if anything, the Labour Party won't go fast enough, but I guess that's aimed at net zero. His backers think that approach can get the Tories to the ballot box, win over swing voters, and maybe get a hung parliament, because he's not aiming to win here. What he's aiming for is some sort of, maybe a coalition, I don't know with who, or just making sure Labour can't do a lot. Labour don't have the numbers to do much. But if he manages to get to a hung parliament, that is one of the biggest electoral miracles probably since David Cameron won a majority in 2015. That would be, getting a hung parliament would be a bigger miracle than that David Cameron win. The new strategy faces the same criticisms to the old one. That's not enough to move the dial. I mean, we know what Rishi Sunak is about. Like, we saw him as Chancellor. He can't hide and pretend he's some nuked on. It don't make sense. So yeah, I found this quite an interesting thread from Alex Wickham in Bloomberg. Bloomberg do a lot of good reporting in the UK. They are well worth a follow, so maybe I should drop them both a follow. But because Twitter's so broken, I keep seeing him in my newsfeed anyways. But this, I thought this was worth covering because this is the acts of a desperate politician who doesn't know what to do. So he's trying to feed it. He's trying to go into populism as much as possible, trying to kind of appeal to the ordinary person on such a basic level of, we're going to not do 20 miles per hour speed limits. Don't worry, bro, I'm not going to do a meat tax. You know, this is just absolute nonsense. And just his advisors are trash. I'll be honest, right? The biggest group of fraudulent advisors I've seen was Ed Miliband's team in 2015. Rishi Sunak's team might be worse than Ed Miliband's 2015 team, I'll be honest. They might be worse. And that's a scary thought in the sense of, why are you paying these people so much money when they give you trash advice? You know, the only good thing is I'm glad that they'll help you lose in a worse way. If you had a competent team, you might not be in such a big mess. But let's be honest now, I want you to lose. So, you know, keep hiring a bunch of frauds and we'll see how far that gets you. Probably to California, where you'll probably lobby for big business to get access to the NHS and other things, which is, you know, it's a decent life, I guess. But as a politician, as a prime minister, your legacy will be complete trash. Let's be honest. Boris Johnson's legacy will be worse than yours, and then yours. But anyways, I'm going to leave it there. Let me know what you think in the comments below. This video's gone for about 20 minutes, over 22 minutes. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Like, comment, share, subscribe. Support the channel on Patreon if you can. And yeah, let me know what you think about Sunak's more aggressive populist turn. And I'll catch you in the next one.